Hello and good moment to everyone, wherever you are in the world. I'm on the west coast of the US, so it's a good morning over here, but well aware that so many of you are so many different places. You can absolutely turn on your videos if you want. It's really wonderful to have your face energy in these meetings. So, welcome to the Center for Non-Dual Awareness, hosted morning with Barbara Veal-Smith. I'm Sarah, and we'll keep everyone, see if you can keep yourself muted if you can, but definitely turn your video on if you can. I'm going to share a little bit about the center, and I'm going to kind of give a little rundown of some technical things for Zoom. And then I'm going to share about Barbara. And then Barbara's going to share a couple technical, a new layer that we're going to play around with Zoom today during her presentation. And then we'll go right into it. So I just want to, welcome everyone that's never heard of us. Anyone from Barbara's community that's joining us, anyone that's watching this on the recording, welcome. The Center for Non-Dual Awareness is a nonprofit organization committed to the planet-wide realization of awakened non-dual consciousness and unconditional love. And to do this, we support a rapidly growing community of those that are called to serve, share, and express the wisdom of non-dual awakening with others. And one of the ways that we support this community is through hosting online video gatherings and teleseminars such as this. So welcome, and we're honored that you're here, and we honor your dedication to the path of awakening and embodiment that you're on. So Barbara is one of us that is devoted to the peace that is already and always here. She's committed to fostering peace where it has not yet blossomed in the world. She leads her own nonprofit effort called Undefended Heart, which you can find at undefendedheart.org. And she also, the Undefended Heart empowers people to live in the blossoming of peace. She is also a transpersonal life coach, specializing in open focus attention training and psychosynthesis. So her personal work is at contentmentcoaching.com. Barbara is a lifelong learner and educator with a heart for silence and service. And along with her husband, Mark, she is also the co-founder of Harmony Lake Ranch, which is also harmonylakeranch.com. You can check that out. So I'm going to welcome Barbara. I just want to say hi. I'll pass it to you in a second, but I'm very honored that you're here and sharing this offering with us. Just going to share a couple of things about Zoom for anyone that's new or a refresher. There are a couple ways that you can view this meeting. So one is in gallery view, where you'll see everyone's little face. And up in the right-hand corner, there's also an option for speaker view. So who's ever speaking will show up full screen. If you'd like to only pin Barbara's video, up on the screen, there's a pin option. So when we are in gallery view, if you go to Barbara's small box, up on the right-hand corner of her small box are three little dots. It's a little menu option. If you click on that, the drop down will give you an option to pin video. And that way it will be Barbara's video. She'll be sharing her screen. So if you pin it up there, that's a good way that it will just stay there no matter what other noise is occurring with anyone else. Let's see, we are recording this session. Be aware of that. there will be a question and answer session at the end where you can ask questions. And the way we do that when we have a big group like this is we use the raise hand function. So to raise hand, you go to the bottom of your screen and you click on participants. And there should be a white box that shows up on the right. At the bottom of that white box, if you scroll down, there should be a button that says raise hand. If you click on that, you can go ahead and try it right now if you want to. There'll be like a little blue raise hand. There you go. Jeffrey, Barbara did it. Teresa. So I'll see that raise hand and unmute you, call your name, and you can talk from there, and I'll unmute you. Then you can lower your hand when we're done. Yeah. So I'm going to turn over to Barbara, and she's going to share, unless there are any questions currently with any of that or anything regarding Zoom. Oh, if anything does come up for you technological-wise, also in that participants box, you can chat. Or actually, no, at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat function that will open up a side box, and you can chat with me, the host. You want to make sure to choose who you're talking to. There's an everyone option, and there's also a particular person option. So choose Love at Non-Dual Center Host. You can chat with me, and I will see if I can troubleshoot any tech problems you're having. Okay, so an exciting new feature with Zoom that we're going to use, we've never used before, is the whiteboard option. Very excited about this. So Barbara, I'm going to hand it over to you. You can tell us about this option and then just go ahead and take it from there right into your presentation. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sarah, for that great introduction and getting us all started. So as Sarah said, I'm going to share something called a whiteboard right now. And in a moment, you should see there's a plain whiteboard, just as I said. And right where it says Barbara's sharing her screen, you should see a little button that says options. And you can hover over that. It should say view options. Hover over that and choose annotate. And when you do that, a little menu will come up. And we're going to practice using this just for a moment. And I'm going to invite you to click on the T for text. And when you do that, you should see a little click on the whiteboard after you click text, and you'll see a dotted line with a box.
And Barbara, when you have 1 second, I want to share that you're a little bit echoey, and I think that's because I saw that you have 2 screens open.
I did have a backup, so let me do that. Let me close that out. Thanks for saying, Sarah.
Yeah.
There we go. How's that? Better?
Ah, yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay, great. So again, the menu should come down when you clicked on view options, choose annotate, and then you can choose text, and then put your cursor there. And if you would, write in your name and the state you're from. And once you do that, then click on the outside of your box, and it should show up for all of us to see. And we're starting to get some people's, Sarah in Portland.
Mm-hmm. Hey, great. So cool.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Barbara, is it possible to edit once we've...
I don't think so. I can save the screen when we're done, and that we could have a copy of it. But other than that, I don't know that we can edit the screen itself. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyone else wants to try writing their name in and just putting it in a box here so we can see where you are, and then you get a sense of how that's going to work. And I'm going to invite us to use this function later. Great. Terrific.
I'm not getting it when I click annotate. Nothing's happening.
Okay. If you click annotate, you should see a little menu that says a number of different functions: select, text, draw, spotlight, eraser. Is that coming up for you?
it won't click. It won't click annotate.
Okay. It's not essential to our time together. As Sarah was describing, it's a little bit of fun for us today. Close to Halloween, I think I was feeling a little playful myself. So if you can't get it to work, not to worry. And we'll just kind of go with the flow on that. So
thank you.
Yeah.
And Judith, during that time of sharing what our experience was, you can chat in as
great.
well, and I can add it for you if you want.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll go back to mute.
Okay, thanks. So the one other thing I'll show you here is that if you click on the draw box now, and you'll see there's a number of different symbols. On the second row in the far right, there's a little check mark. So if there were two Barbaras here from Massachusetts, I could put a check mark next to that and indicate that, oh, my name's Barbara and I'm from Massachusetts also. So that's how the check mark works. Again, you just click on the draw. Yep, people are doing it. You can see the draw function. Great. Okay, wonderful. So that's, yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's like the teacher told you can go to the front of the board and write anything you wanted to. It's super fun, right?
Collectively, it's this collective artwork moment.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
There you go. Great. Okay, so I'm going to clear this and we'll start into the, I have some slides that I find helpful just to kind of share the part of the presentation that has some science pieces and so forth. So I'm going to jump over there now and share with you from the slides. Oops. Here we go. Happy Halloween. Go back. So. Takes a minute to load. So we just did that, practicing annotation. This is the title of our, what I want to be sharing with you today. So neuroscience and the cultivation of embodied awake presence. Looking together, obviously we are a wisdom group, so much richness here. And I got a question this morning around intention. And so I thought it would be good to start right with that, to invite you to set an intention. And the question that came in was, before awakening, the sense of being very specific felt more natural. And now the question was, how does intention shift from the level of being? So I'll respond from what I've seen with my own teachers and in my own heart right now, what I'm feeling. My intention for this is that it would just serve our collective highest good and the purpose to which the Center for Non-Dual Awareness is dedicated, as Sarah so beautifully said. So when I think about intention now, it has much more of a general characteristic, although again, because the personal is never left out, sometimes it can be very specific as well. So, but I'll pause here and invite you to set your own intention for this morning, and then we'll jump into the science pieces. And if you did bring a journal or something to write with and you want to write that down, this is a good time to state your intention for your own clarity and witnessing. Yeah. So I want to also add my thanks to Sarah's for all of you participating, those who might listen on the recording, and for the center. The reason I'm really with you this morning is because I so value the work that the center is doing. And I was having a very informal conversation with Sarah around this topic. And she said to me, oh, why don't you do a hosted morning on that? So it was really rich to see that the community that's coming together, and it's been in active for, I think, 7 or 8 years now. Is that right, Sarah?
Sorry, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, continually inviting new folks forward. So please do share the word about the center if you're drawn to do that. So I'm starting here with Happy Halloween because, as I said, I'm feeling a little playful, and And really, I love this imagining and the reality that in truth, we're playing all the roles. So in this moment, I'm playing the role of facilitator and leader, and yet clearly there's a lot of wisdom here, and we're all teachers for one another. So because of that, I'm guessing you're drawn because you've already figured out what might be quite obvious, that realization does not necessarily or automatically mean you're able to live what's been seen. So unfortunately, one of my main teachers has been Adyashanti, and he used to say, and probably still does, that waking up was the easy part. On the other side of waking up, I never thought that seemed possible, that was the easy part, but it does, with a bit of hindsight now, feel quite true. So anyway, so we're here to talk about embodiment, and I'm going to start just with a very short personal story. I'm going to get a sip of water first here. Along with my Halloween theme. So one of the deepest realizations that came for me was on a long 9-day retreat with Adyashanti was leading and guiding that. And I'll just cut to the chase. The very end of the retreat, a question arose, an inquiry arose, and it was, just because there's self-reflection, does that mean there's a self? And in that moment, this incredible opening, again, words fail, as all of you know quite well, and it was just seen so clearly that there was nothing there in terms of a separate me. And I walked out of the retreat, but within moments, of course, the me said, "Oh, I got it," which was so comical. I just seen there was nothing there, and yet there was something trying to grab even that. But the point of the slide here is to say that when I went to the airport that night, what deepened was this sense of, if you're familiar with the Harry Potter stories, in the Harry Potter story, Harry is able to put over himself a big cloak that makes him invisible. And as I looked around the airport that night, what seemed to me to be happening was that there was a giant visibility cloak that our true nature, the natural state, love itself, had cloaked itself in all these different forms, from the airport itself to the plane to the people walking by and myself, and all of it was all the one reality. So I just thought it would be fun to share that story, in case you're wondering if you're in the right room here this morning. Are we talking about non-dual awakening, everything and nothing? I also love this quote from Nisargadatta, when he says, "I look inside and see that I am nothing, and that's wisdom. And when I look outside and see that I'm everything, that's love. And between these two, my life turns." And so that's really the heart of what we're addressing here. And clearly, there's this sense of a kind of paradox in that, right? So again, a poem from Aja where he says, "I'm all hollowed out now like a reed. I gave everything for this, and still I laughingly wonder, how could it have been so cheap?" Mm-hmm. And so I'm juxtaposing these as, it's outrageously expensive on one level, to that of the separate self. And yet, to the truth of us, it costs absolutely nothing, because this is what we truly are. And it ties into me for this, in that when we're talking about embodiment, it's sometimes said that just one thought can separate heaven and hell. And that one thought can be, something that I'm holding on to in memory, something that has been difficult in life that wants to be spoken at this moment. But if I'm able to see that the truth of me doesn't actually need to speak that, there's a greater sense of embodiment that gets realized. So the point of all that is to say, even though we can recognize that there's nothing there in the sense of separation, this still takes willingness. And I'm told, I never saw this in writing, but someone mentioned that Nisargadatta called for vigilance until the body drops. So in one sense, it's quite simple. Everything is arising in the one unchanging reality that we are, whatever name you give that: consciousness, awareness, spirit, the dazzling dark, and all of the things arising are that too. So no separation. And yet it can be quite complicated. So this is a sketch of some of the brain networks when they look at the brain in the fMRI machine, and different parts light up. And today what I want to do is draw on the big picture And I'm speaking from my work with Kelly McGonigal's neuroscience. So I'm not a neuroscientist, as probably obvious by now, but Kelly McGonigal is. And she's a researcher from Stanford whose work I like very much. She's part of a new field that's called science help, like self-help. So she's taking very complex science and making it more understandable for people like me. And I was speaking, as I said, to Sarah about some of this, and she said, I think that's really helpful information. Why don't you share it? So I'm just going to catch up with myself on my notes here. So what we're going to do is talk about those things. And my hope is that, so can you still see my little picture there? I don't know if you can see this card here.
I can. I'm not sure how everyone has their screen.
Anyway, I'll tell you what it says. It's a key card from staying in a hotel. You know, when you put those plastic key cards in? This one's from a Hilton property, and on it says, start enjoying instant benefits. So my hope is that today you'll walk away with some very instant benefit, practical applications for your own life. But keys. I really like the idea of working with keys, and I want you to be able to take away what's key for your life at the end of our time together. So if you haven't heard this term, this is an important one. The default network refers to our brains when they're at rest. In other words, when someone is told to do nothing and they're in the brain scan machine, there are certain areas of the brain, a system really of brain regions that light up and engage in various thoughts. When we're not focusing on a mental task or not involved in the outside world. So the scientists call these co-activated mental activities. So the first thing that we're doing is commenting. And again, this is not new news to anyone who's here. Well, we have lots of opinions, we criticize, consider other possibilities about what's happening in the present moment when the mind is just left to do its own thing. We also time travel, going back and forth, memories of the past, imagine scenarios of the future, trying to imagine what might be a better reality than the one I'm in. The third of those co-activated mental processes is called self-referential processing. And as the name suggests, it means that we're taking what's happening in the present moment and we're interpreting it through the lens of me, right? So you get the sense already that a brain at rest without any training, that doesn't meditate, that hasn't been to teachers like most people in this room have been, is really trying very hard to strengthen a sense of separate self. And the fourth thing that we're doing is social cognition. We're thinking about other people, we're comparing and categorizing ourselves in relationship to the people around us. So you can imagine that these functions had great benefit from an evolutionary perspective. Because if you think about it, when you're a lion on the savannah, you're on the savannah and there's a lion hovering, the fact that you're looking around, commenting, suggesting another alternative, I need to get out of here very quickly, that could be extremely helpful. I might die and the tribe might miss me. So again, just touching on those four levels, you can see where this served. But that's the moment that we're in, is the evolving moment between coming from that more reptilian, I need to be safe experience into what the alternative is. So I want to just pause there. Is there anyone that has a question or a comment on just what I've shared there, those four co-activated mental states? And just to give other voices a chance to be in the conversation here. And if no one has anything, that's perfectly fine, but I just want to pause. I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm going to keep going then. Back to our... Okay, so 47% of the time, there was a giant study done through Harvard that indicated, and it was 5,000 participants, which is quite large for one of these studies. And they found that about half the time people are in these alternate realities, mind wandering, daydreaming, all day, every day, no matter what they're doing, except during sexual intimacy, when that's only happening 30% of the time. This is, of course, on average. So that's kind of an extraordinary figure if, if you think about it, right? So where does that leave us, and what's the alternative? What we're interested in, if you want to fully embody what you've seen, is cultivating what's called the experiential network. It's the present-centered network, and there are some very specific pieces that get us to that. So when the experiential network is activated, what we find is that the fast waves that are at the top of the kind of brain waves called beta are reduced. There's increased alpha, and insight comes the sense of no self, unity consciousness, and that's related to increased gamma. So again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, because if you're sitting in this room, you've probably experienced this very clearly, and may or may not be conscious about how does that happen. So that's what I'm going to direct our attention to now. And I thought the best way to do that might be first to do a little bit of guiding. And so I'm going to, let me see here. Invite you into just, again, kind of a quieting time. So if you were maybe taking that in on the level of mind, absorbing what I was saying, I'm going to invite us all now to about 5 minutes, do some a guided meditation. So if you're comfortable, great. And if you're not, take a minute to settle in. Allow yourself to get a little bit more comfortable, however you're experiencing this. If you're seated or lying down. And I'm going to invite your attention to travel or walk from your mind, if you were processing on mental levels, down your throat and right into your heart space. And feeling the heart and the sense of the mission of the center toward unconditional love in the world, and feeling that heart energy move right out to your hands. And feeling first one hand. So invite your attention to move into the hand on the right side of your body. And feel the sensations of the hand. Maybe there's a pulsing blood flow. On the right side now, invite your attention into the left side, the left hand. And now feel both hands together. And again, just to be clear, we're not looking from the outside, trying to visualize our hands. It's more of a closing eyes, feeling the hand from within, as if you didn't know there were hands there from a visual perspective, but you can feel them from inside. And in the same way, I invite you now to feel on the right side, your right foot, on the left side, the left foot, and then both together. And as you continue feeling relaxation, take a deep breath. And now invite attention to go to your mouth, to feel the mouth, the sensations in the mouth. An orb of sensation. With the tongue, the tension in the tongue, feeling that. Feeling the right side of the mouth and the left side of the mouth. Front and back. The weight of the tongue in the mouth. And now allow your attention to move from within your mouth up into the right side of your ear, from within your head. And moving inside to the left ear, and then feeling both ears together. And then feeling your eyes, softening your gaze, even if your eyes are closed, allowing that to soften even further. Noticing the breath in your lungs. And now I'm going to invite you to feel the space on the right side of the body and allow your awareness to do the looking. So from awareness, looking out, feeling space on the right side of the body. From awareness, feeling the space on the left side of the body. Feeling the space above your body. Feeling the space below your body. And now allowing that multi-directionally, allow your attention or awareness to move out into space from all directions of the body. And noticing that no effort is required. Just a simple noticing, softening the body, allowing the shoulders to drop. And now coming back into the group consciousness together without going back to the mind for any second opinions. Just feel your own presence. And if you're moved to, I'm going to put that whiteboard up. And just so we can get a lot of folks in quickly, if you want to use that text function and write something about your experience here that others could see. For example, if you felt open or spacious, you could write that on the board. If you agree or that was your experience too, you can use the draw check mark and just put a check there. So just take a moment now if you're inclined to kind of process in our group space and share anything about what you experienced in that just short bit of guiding that we did together. Yes, and if you're inclined to draw a picture instead of using text, that's perfectly fine, as we've got a nice smiley face there, beautiful heart, whatever is moving for you to share. Great. Well, that's very beautiful, I think. just to feel that connection across time and space, the field that we share. Great. Wonderful. So I'm going to save this. If anyone is trying to get something on that can't, you can put it in the chat box instead if I make this go away here now. So thank you all for your contributions. Okay. Great. And then I'm going to come back over with you now. So I don't think we can give words really, although we try. And I appreciate all the folks who have put something up for us to be with there together. So I want to go back now to tell you a little bit more about what I've discovered about why that happens and what you can do then to make each moment of your life even more of that sense of embodied full presence, moment to moment, day to day, as you're moving through life. And we're going to talk about practicing that while the stakes are low so that you can feel it more when the stakes get higher. So what I'm showing you here on the screen now is called the homunculus. It's two different views of the same thing. One is a three-dimensional and the other is a two-dimensional view. And if you've never seen this before, and I hadn't until just a few years ago when I worked with a gentleman named Les Femi out of Princeton. He does neurofeedback, and I went there and trained with him and had my brain all hooked up to measure brain waves and all that. It was quite fascinating. But this is what a person would look like if each part of the body grew in relation to the area of the cortex that controls it. So in other words, the way I hear that is that this is showing us in a very visual way what parts of the body map to the most real estate in the brain. And so you can see here, the thumb is quite large and the fingers and the hands. So the mouth is also quite large, and the tongue, and then all of the sense organs, right? The nose, eyes, ears are also here. And then some things you might expect to be quite large aren't as large as you would think. Most people think the most sensitive part of their body is the genitalia, but this visual gives us a different picture. So that's quite important. The next piece to look at is the space itself. So Les Femi, the gentleman I just mentioned, he has a couple of good books. And if you notice this quote, he says, space itself seems to reset neural networks affected by stress, returning them to their original fully balanced functioning. So if you're out of balance, one of the first things you might want to think about is the space, which is so invisible, it's easily overlooked. But if you could even notice the space between the letters of the word space, and I'm going to be quiet for a moment, notice the space between the sentences here. And I'm guessing you can feel a shift even when you're reading. So this is something you can practice if you like to read moment to moment. So this is very immediate. So I'm going to flash back to this, very immediate, putting your attention in your hands, in the thumbs, in the mouth, the eyes soften, and the ears. All of those things together help diminish that internal self-talk that I was pointing us toward in the beginning. Commentary, self-referential processing, social cognition, all those things diminish. So again, here's where we're being awareness in the body, relaxed, and then being the undivided reality, the whole, through the experience of space. And what's really key here is that it's simultaneously doing this. Simultaneously holding opposing experiences in awareness is what brings us into the present-centered network, which makes perfect sense if you think about it, because that's the truth of us. The truth of us is equally at home in the relative, in the transcendent, and it's equally available both and at all times. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, this was just huge when I started to really feel the weight of this. So the next slide I have there, I say, let's get practical. So I'll give you an example about how I use this. So I like to play tennis. And in fact, this is how I broke my wrist. I was on the tennis court. So I fell and broke the bone right here and had to have surgery. But what I'm really coming to more and more is that practical is really related to practice, 24/7, every day, often, anytime, and every time that it occurs to you to do so. So this is what was happening to me. I was starting to play badly, not on the day that I broke my wrist, but another time. I was getting agitated. And I noticed, oh my gosh, what's the space in which it's all arising? And in that moment, the attention opened out. I was in a gym, so there's a huge amount of space. I could feel the inherent unity in the room, and the person on the other side making that great shot and myself were completely one. And I could rejoice in the other person doing well, even though, of course, I wanted to do well as also. No separation. So as I said in the beginning, I think of it this way: every day is Halloween, and we're playing all the roles. A few other examples, just to give you a feel for how you might use this. Perhaps you like to play cards, and you're playing cards, and your intention is to have fun, but it's also to win, but you're not winning. Maybe that annoys you, and the annoyance can be the messenger that says, oh, I'm in separation. I'm just caring about how my cards look. What's it like to see the whole picture? Same thing with a puzzle. You're making a puzzle, slight annoyance, you can't find it. What's it like to practice that sense of equanimity, that it's okay if I get the puzzle piece in, and it's okay if I don't. And my experience with all that is that by doing these things when we're in that those moments that are lower stakes, that we have a greater and greater chance of employing and living from the truths that we know. When the stakes get higher, when we're in a conflict with a loved one, we've, if you will, like kind of set breadcrumbs. We notice how to get back to home. So the beauty for me, again here, one of my favorite quotes from Corinthians, love never fails. And when I think about that, even as I read this brief scripture passage from the New Testament, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, I think if this does not describe our true nature, I think it to me is one of the most beautiful descriptions of what we are. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It's not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking, not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. And you and we and everything are that love. And we're not talking about spiritual bypass in any form. I'm still practicing tennis because I would like to improve. And Sarah's going to say a few more words, less of the humor part of that, but about the importance of the not spiritual bypass when we speak and kind of play with, in a sense, feeling ourselves as the others around us. And I mean, even Donald Trump, truly, that I can see in myself, while I might not actually be him in this expression, in this body, the person that he is not separate from the truth that I am. And when he behaves in certain ways, it might not be that in totality I'm expressing that, but it certainly exists in me in potential. And so that keeps me in that space of how to move toward making change for the good without making others, right? Making someone else the enemy, the person who's not this that we are. So I said a few words about that, but Sarah, if there's anything else you want to share, we talked about that ahead of time. You're jumping in here.
Yeah, I think it's actually summed up in part of the quote that love always protects. So that's just because we can know ourselves to be Donald Trump in essence, and because we can know ourselves to be anyone that's harming us in essence, love also protects itself as well. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that we don't, that love doesn't come to protect against harm and have boundaries and have needs. And I think that at this point in our spiritual journey, it's important to always point to that right now, that awakening doesn't mean we don't stop setting boundaries to protect. It's just done with love. Is that what we talked about? Yeah.
Yes, I think it's beautiful. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Great. So, let me go back here. To summarize some of the key practices to engage this experiential network versus letting the default network run rampant. So once I could identify what was happening, like, oh, anytime I'm making commentary, it's like, oh, I'm in the dream. That's not real. There might be something of benefit, as Sarah just said, but it's not the ultimate real. So to me, embodiment really requires us to be able to relax into what's experientially most true in the moment. And one of the key ways to do that is to simultaneously hold those opposing experiences and attention in and from the body, relaxing the mouth, the eyes, the ears, the hands, the feet, and feeling both sides of the body simultaneously whenever that occurs to you is, I think, an number one practice for engaging the experiential network. And then as you're in the body, you're also aware of the space as you're moving through in the body. Space in the body, we actually know from science that there's more space than there is actual atoms of matter. So there's space in the body and clearly space all around us. So that can both support. I haven't always been an everyday meditator, but the more I learn about science, the more I am absolutely committed to meditation every day. And again, the research shows that even as many as 8, 10, 12 periods of sitting meditation can begin to alter the structures of the brain. What is fascinating to me is that when they have the folks, I think most of the work has been done with monks, the folks who have worked with the Dalai Lama, is that they can measure the experiential network while they ask them to meditate. But when they say, okay, you can stop meditating, the brain still shows all of that lit up. So every day, and Richard Miller, another one of my mentors, is fond of saying little and often. So again, whenever it occurs to you, you can practice any of these things in the life at the sink, washing the dishes, but it's also a practice of meditating every day that can really help build and those brain structures change so that we're more apt to be able to access the experiential and be truly realized to be embodied as what we know moment to moment, day to day, with greater and greater frequency, greater and greater depth. So I think that's a really important piece. So identification, when things arise that are difficult, the reptilian response is fight or flight. And if you feel that arising, if you can notice, oh, there's fear here. And you can, now people are using this phrase, tend and befriend. So welcoming in the experience that's difficult, asking, what does it need? Trying to find out if there's something there for you to see. So tending and befriending rather than trying to get rid of so that you can get back to your nice transcendent or transcendent immanent state, allowing that to come forward. So identification, in my experience, has to precede disidentification, because without that, then we're in that spiritual bypass that Sarah spoke about. So identification, seeing what's arising, disidentify, and then identifying self, capital S, in the truth of the totality. Mm. Last little piece of information. When we've been triggered, neuroscientists have told me that it takes 20 minutes to reset the neural networks. That's really good to know. So if you're really in the thick of something with another person or at work with your boss, whatever it is, take a walk, ask for some time out, take a break, breathe, you can move into that space, as I was talking to you about what I do when I play tennis or playing cards or puzzle making, right? So seeing the totality that you're the boss and you're the person who's yelling at you, right? So we let go of othering to give us the space to come back in and be our most authentic selves in the particularity of our own expression. So this is how I've been playing with these things, and I hope that this has been of some value to you. These are some sources. My main teachers, as I've mentioned, have been Adia and Mukti Gray, and then others in their lineage. And then I've worked with Les Femi. I like Kelly McGonigal's work, Richard Miller, and then I felt it was important to name the doctor who first coined that term, default mode network. So this is just, as Sarah mentioned, my own work with Undefended Heart. I'm out training, hopefully, groups of people to work with this so that we can help people understand in our difficult times with race relations and all the other things going on the planet. What I'd like to move now toward is grounding the learning and sharing, because there is great wisdom in this group. These were just a few examples from my experience. I'd love to hear if anybody else has found things that work for them, or take a few moments. I guess we could do this first, take a few moments and invite wisdom to show you any practices that would be so supportive for you today to take away. What's the key? As I mentioned, that enjoying instant benefits. What's your key that you need? So let's just take a few minutes. You can take your journal out, do some writing, ask a few questions of spirit, wisdom, guide for you, and then we'll open it up and move in our last time together. We've got, I guess, about an hour and 10 minutes, 40 more minutes, 38 to be exact, of time together, and we can open this all up to hear and share what's cooking and what's coming up for everyone here. Okay, how does that sound? Yeah, I see Sarah nodding, so good. Okay, great. Chris says good. Okay, great. Okay, great. So take a few minutes now. Again, do some jotting of notes, reflecting into your own inner wisdom, the deepest truth you know, to invite forward what it is would be most helpful for you today, to see, to remember, to share, and anything is possible. So does anyone have something they want to share, or it could be a question to ask? And Sarah, do you want to call on people and unmute? Does that work for you? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Great. So Sarah will kind of be our facilitator, moderator, and I welcome anything that feels alive for you that you want to share here.
Yeah, we've got Teresa.
Go for it. Teresa?
Hi. I don't know if my video is in the right place, so I'm just going to check that first.
There you go. Now we can see you.
Oh, we have?
Okay, great.
Yes, great. Thank you.
So as I was really, I really thank you for this presentation. I think I was especially grateful to be reminded of the default network and how often that's operating. And I've read some of the studies around what people are experiencing when they're in the default network, you know, kind of a low-grade unhappiness.
Absolutely.
Is often the experience when they've pinged people and asked them to report their level of happiness when they're in that sort of ruminating state.
Yes.
And as I was contemplating in reflection to your question, I'm a psychotherapist and I work with clients. And I've spent time really working with them. The kind of neuroscience that I focused on that's been useful has been things like, and I'm seeing you, by the way, Sarah, as opposed to Barbara, which is fine, but just in case it matters. But anyway.
Yeah, you can also pin Barbara's video so that you only see her up.
Okay, well, I can look at her little picture.
Okay.
And I can look at you too, Sarah. It's nice to see your face.
Hello.
It's been working with the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. So a lot of tools teaching clients to notice when they're triggered, when they're out of the zone of tolerance, all sorts of things, rubbing on the thalamus, getting grounded. And they remind me a little bit, I'm interested if you could speak to the intersection between those two systems, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, and this experiential, present-centered network, and the default, because they're different. It's almost like I'm being reminded that the default network is not when you're triggered. You're not in a fight or flight mode. You're not in the sympathetic kind of reactive mode. It's different than that. But anyway, I feel like you might have something interesting to say about that, and it's really present here as a very interesting, engaging question.
Yes.
Because I'm realizing that actually recommending to clients this, I can picture even particular clients that are clearly caught in being too often in this default network, and it kind of resets things. It goes in a negative direction for them, this kind of ruminating place.
Yes.
So anyway, that's what's on my mind.
Yeah, great. I love what you're bringing forward. So I think you have already really spoken to your own question. So just to mirror that back to you, absolutely, the default network is, as I understand it, just what's happening naturally for people when they're not doing something that is what they call task specific. So that's another network that gets activated. Say if you're, very focused on something, then you may not have those ruminating thoughts happening. But if you're not doing something specific, then that's just kind of what's running all the time in the background, right? So we're imagining, wow, how's this going to really work for me? Should I have spent this time here in this webinar this morning? Is this really going to be of benefit, right? So, and when we're really just sort of marinating in that stew, then you're absolutely right. It generally leads to dissatisfaction, unhappiness, because the mind in that movement of those different activations is never happy with what's here. It's just obvious, right? And so that's so clear. And the more time spent there, the more that depth of unhappiness can brew. So that to me is what takes people into greater levels of depression, anxiety, so forth. So being triggered. So the way I feel these two, as you brought the question forward, is that when we're identified only with ourselves as the default functions, right, then we can feel like, oh, so-and-so's yelling at me. I'm in trouble. I'm, right? It's as if we were being chased on the savannah, when actually that's not happening, right? There's that we can notice. So we can bring forward the parasympathetic system, calm ourselves down. So helping clients to down-regulate, I believe it's called, right? Knowing those tools that you're talking about, rubbing on the thalamus, as you mentioned, and so forth. So having a skill set that allows us to see when we've been triggered can absolutely support kind of waking up out of that dream of a separate self that is somehow under threat, when really psychologically something might be happening, emotionally something's happening, all of those things might be occurring, but you're actually here, probably in a room, safe. No one's, well, that's not always true, obviously, in crisis. So I'm not speaking about someone being abused and so forth. But if there is enough space and the person is experiencing something that's just difficult, not abusive, right, then all of those things can be supportive. So I guess I think that to really address your question, parasympathetic and sympathetic being in balance, right, the homeostasis of the body, has great ability to support our recognizing when we're overly identified with the default network. So is that helpful? And that relationship? So I think it's that perseverating sense of thoughts that get us constricted as a separate me. And then when we feel triggered, right, then now we're in the engagement and we're under threat and the system is overdoing. Yeah. And then we've got to come back in. Okay.
Yeah. And in terms of working with people to really, both systems are just very, very useful to know about as a way of speaking about why it's so important to have practices that ground us and bring us present related to this knowing about this default network. So anyway, Thank you for bringing that back into my awareness. It's really, really good.
Yes. Great
good stuff.
Great. Good. Glad it's helpful. Wonderful. Anyone else have something they want to share?
Barbara, I just wanted to say that this might be also a good moment to talk a little bit about, so you mentioned it in one of the bullet points, but we had talked about this previously, of practicing in the low risk times. And I feel like it's worth you sharing about that again.
Yeah.
Given what you just talked about, instead of only kind of, if you just try to apply this how Teresa said, you're out of the zone of tolerance. You talk about that difference of building it up before, and not just addressing it when a deep trigger is arising, but yeah.
Well, and I think that's absolutely essential, because even though I feel like I practice a lot, that doesn't mean I'm immune. And I practice a lot in low risk settings. That doesn't mean that I'm immune to. So for me, that, just to speak to what you said, I think whenever it occurs to us, right? So we can notice that the mind could beat us up for like, oh, I was so unconscious just now, right? Rather than rejoicing like, oh, now I'm not unconscious, right? So we can almost condition ourselves negatively if we're not careful, right? Mm-hmm. So every time you pop out, if you will, out of one of those thought states, perseverating, whether it's checking in about your own, how am I doing socially, or whatever it is you've gotten caught in temporarily, whenever you're not in it, ground that, notice, celebrate, right? Mm-hmm. Feel the joy. So it's like coming home, like sometimes falling asleep can be so awful, of course, but falling asleep can also be beautiful because you get to wake up again. Yeah. It's like, and there's a joy in that, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah. So one of my very first teachers, I went on a retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh when our kids were quite little. We took our children, who were at the time, I think about 6 and 8 years old, on a family retreat. And just very briefly, I see Chris has his hand up, so Chris, will go right to you. Someone asked Thich Nhat Hanh about his own awakening. And instead of telling some big personal story or, like some blowout, experience, he just said very simply, a person can wake up many times in one day.
Beautiful.
I thought that was so lovely. So I think that's what we do. We wake up and we practice and we're present as much as it's possible whenever it occurs to us.
Mm.
Anytime. And then we're like, just like you would go to the gym and work out and you're building those muscles, it's building, cultivating the skills and the possibility for greater ease, for greater peace, greater liberation. So Chris.
Mm.
Oh, you unmuted me. Thank you. I have a curiosity, maybe on the other side of things.
Yeah.
I'm off the deep end in a way. So the question is, how does one, or should one, try to deepen practice into the spaciousness or the nothing? Well, I call it nothing open, but it's equivalent to your spacious space work. So my practice seems to have hit a plateau. It seems that there are functional limits which aren't healthy to go beyond, and one can get lost in the vastness of being.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I'm just interested in reflections.
Okay. What's your sense about?
Lost there.
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of seem to have a sense about what you need, right? As you spoke that question, it seemed to me that you were answering to yourself, like, I have functional limits beyond which it doesn't seem helpful to go, right?
And
So,
I'm wondering if there are any comments.
okay. Okay.
I'm just comparing notes.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
And if nobody has any comments, that's fine. But
Right.
it's kind of, I don't have trouble with my mind chattering at me. I have trouble in the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'll make a comment and we'll open it up. Anybody else who wants to. I know that when I am too spacious, I have a lot of friction in my life. I don't empty the trash. My husband gets mad at me. I don't see the recycle bin. I'm just really spacious, and it's very hard to function, and it creates suffering in my life. So for me, a balance of being in the body spaciously, in the world spaciously, is my intention at this point in my life. So, but that's where I'm at. So others, I'd love to hear if there's other comments for people that want to share to Chris.
I love your comment.
Jeff, I can unmute you.
Oh, well, first, am I good?
Yeah, do you have a comment?
There you go. Now you're unmuted now.
I'm muted? Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Barbara, first. That was really good. And I actually have a lot of background in neuroscience and neuroanatomy and all the scientific things. I was with Chris's question, as far as I was trying to assess when he was talking about whether there was a hesitancy of going outside of the mind into being, or if there was a discomfort in that regard, or I was just trying to get a little clearer of what that was going, and then kind of reflect in my personal experience when I first descended deep into being, which for me was a very unusual step.
If I can just respond to clarify, Jeff, my epicenter of consciousness is in my sacrum. I do not live in my head. I have no mind stream. I have no thought stream. So I'm not talking about getting out of the mind. I'm talking about the sense of spaciousness that goes forever, that is not mental. It's spiritual.
Okay, right.
And so in this Center for Non-Dual Awareness, we can talk about these things, but if I could not talk about them with a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
Yeah. So, I mean, from my experience, what you speak of is where there's no more mind. There's no more thought, and that's pure beingness.
Yes.
And that's pure silence, which is uncomfortable for most people, and it was for me. I spent long amount of time in that. But that's the beingness, is the beingness that's not separate from anything. As soon as the mind comes back on, then the separation is made once thought is identified with as self. And this is, Barbara, that's where I was getting at just in your lecture, is that I spend all those years learning all of these things, and I believe them to be true. And they are true on an observational standpoint, in a scientific nature, in the laboratory of when we look at a functional MRI and we see what areas of the brain. But then non-dualistically, one has to realize that that's just, no truth is an absolute truth. Nothing is ever true. It's a truth for now. Even the belief of self is not true. So to unlearn all these things, one then arrives at what is true, and that's this. That cannot never be named, and nothing is severed from this present moment. So I do enjoy the science of it, but for me personally, my hardest thing was to say, now I have to unlearn all that. It was never true, including everything that my parents had taught me and everything else. Nothing was ever true. And then I arrived at the simple truth.
Jeffrey, I think you froze.
Yes.
We've lost you.
Okay.
I still hear him.
Okay. I
okay. But that's
I
it.
can hear him perfectly.
There's the memory of us. There's the memory of us. But then there's just that cannot be spoken. That is this moment that's nothing is separate from the awareness that has come to existence.
Yeah.
And that's something that I guess they don't teach in medical school.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate the depth of what you're sharing. And I also feel like for people who have not immersed themselves in the sciences you have, when they're in places of suffering, to actually understand what's happening, as best we know right now, which we all know science changes. It's not an absolute. Next year, we might know something we didn't know, and that might make something irrelevant that we thought was true now. So I completely hear you, but to also be able to be fluid with understanding what's going on can be helpful to some people, because then they can make sense of like, oh, well, geez, I'm just eminently practical, right? So if you've seen that there is nothing in separation, but that sense of thought is still circulating, if you recognize that that's what's going on from an evolutionary perspective, I think there's a greater chance you're going to be able to disidentify and come back into the truths that you know. So that's the intention behind sharing some of that, that it would be supportive to people in that journey as they continue to live into, right, the fullness. And I guess for me, I also think that this that we are leaves nothing out. So the memory of you as a person, I think there's room for that too. There's memory and there's beauty in the loving relationships of family. And on the absolute level, all that passes away. But in the realm of the time and space, this that we are makes room for everything. And it is everything. And so nothing needs to be rejected in my experience. So it's all held here simultaneously.
No, I agree with you, because some of the things you were saying about the sympathetic, and those were good points, because sometimes we're not even aware that we're in a sympathetic, high alert state. We might not even be aware of that. But to bring our attention to things also and to feel them, not even on an intellectual basis, that's another component. Like if we don't want to feel heartbreak, in fact, when we actually allow ourselves to feel it, that's when the healing can take place, rather than reading in a book what we should do. So just, you're absolutely right. The science does have a large play in that, but then actually allowing ourselves to feel, I guess that's where we can call, that's the spiritual aspect, is the actual experiencing of that without the context of putting into.
Yes. So that's what I was saying about the tend and befriend. Let it be here and give it some space to be. What does it need, right? And when I work with clients, I often give the example, if you have a child and they have a nightmare and they're knocking at your door, what do? You open the door and give them a great big hug, right? So something's presenting. It could look like rage, but it's knocking at your door, in the door of your heart. Are you going to turn it away and push it away? Or are you going to welcome it in? And the truth of us has already welcomed it. So we're just mirroring, in a sense, in the level of form too. So yeah. So great. Anyone else want to share? Ask. We have about 14 minutes more. Sloan?
Sloan, I'll unmute you.
think he's still muted. Wait 1 second, Sloan, we can't hear you.
Oh,
Am I unmuted?
Yes, now we can hear you. Thank you.
And now I can hear myself. I'm trying to relate this, Barbara, to what you were talking about in terms of, that is in terms of what Chris and Jeff were saying, in relating that to identification, disidentification, and self-identification.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to me that Chris was talking about what he was identifying with, but it wasn't clear to me what the challenge was that he was dealing with. That is the disidentification. And I wondered if Chris could talk a bit about what is given that he's described the spaciousness that he's living, can you also talk about what the challenge is in dealing with that and what you hope to move toward?
Let's see if I can answer you, Sloan. I think Barbara articulated well the problem. You ignore the trash.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a sense of becoming so diffuse that you lose your organizing center. And so there's this kind of, and maybe it's just a matter of practice to be able to come to being able to be more spacious. But I'm just, it feels to me like I'm at an edge there, and I lose my awareness of being in time and space. So I kind of go back and forth between timeless time and human time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just part of my spiritual journey. We're all on different spiritual journeys. Mine is just, and I don't expect my spiritual journey to be the same as everybody else's, but I just thought I would put that out and see if there are any responses or other ways of looking at it.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
I was wondering whether Barbara would talk about, it seems to me that the tension between the identification and the disidentification, that dialectical process allows you to deal in a healthy way with what you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. So when Chris was just talking about coming in and so forth, I was getting that sense of if I were drawing, I'd be drawing an 8 on its side, right? Mm-hmm. The symbol
Yes.
for eternity.
Yes.
Sort of like the Nisargadatta quote in the beginning, right? I look within and there's nothing there. And I look outside and I am everything that is. And between these two, my life turns. So yes. I think there is a sense of an arising. There seems like someone here. She gets up in the morning, talks to her kids, she goes to whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and there's a turning in and there's a nourishing the truth of being. And then that lives itself more fully in the day-to-day life. And it loves everywhere it goes. And so in my home, at least, when I completely give over to spirit, I'll say, and I don't attend to the everyday life, that's not healthy and it makes difficulty. So that's not loving. And so I've always been taught in the retreats that I've been on and my primary spiritual teachers, it's like back in the everyday world, that's where the spiritual rubber hits the road. The idea isn't to me to get blown out all the time and just rest on my cushion. I mean, there's a whole big world here that hasn't in expression felt the totality of this that we are. So I'm very much at work trying to do the both. So to be in my body, to be in the world of time and space in a way that would be of benefit, to make change. Because there are some things on one level, of course, everything's fine and it's all perfect. And on the relative level, and they're both here together and the truth of us meets them both. And I think we're called to mend whatever corner of the world is ours to mend, to engage with whatever we're called to engage with, to love where we're called to love. And for each one of us, that looks different. It's unique. And so I would never say that what Chris is up to in the spaciousness, if it works for him and if it's, but he was bringing it up as saying maybe sometimes it's not feeling like it's right where he wants to be and he's looking for comments. So we're commenting, but so you get the sense that there's a wide range of expression as we live into this, that we we are. So I hope that addresses, Sloan, what you were asking.
Yeah, it relates to just one final comment. A key metaphor of what you said was the notion of space.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that metaphorically and concretely, because it seems to me that wherever one is, that in getting involved in the larger space, it seems to me is a way of, I forget the language, but is developing the healthy network.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether you go out, whether you look outside or whether you go outside,
Mm-hmm.
or whether you look at the Donald Trump and say a part of me is a part of Donald Trump, you know, or the archetypal notion of we're all composed of many, many patterns that exist throughout history and cultures, and the degree to which I can live with and not act out verbally my Donald Trump, then that's a good thing. But to admit that he's a part of me, but that notion of space, you know, in a social psychological sense, or in a Jungian sense, or in the terms that you're using, seems to be an incredibly important idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Wonderful. Good. So Sarah has a few last announcements, but I think we might have time for one other person, or maybe two.
Yeah. Is there
Anyone else wants to have their voice in the conversation, just to share what's alive for them? It doesn't have to be a question. It could be just something that occurred that feels like it wants to be shared. It's quite wide open here. And if there is not something specific, what we could do, if people would like, is go around and give each person just a chance to say a word or two that feels authentic this moment. Maybe a key they're taking away from this, something that grounds the 90 minutes. We're almost 90 minutes spent together that feels like this is what I came for, or this is what I'm
taking away.
Taking away. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that feel? I think we're going to have time to do that.
Sure. I can just go down the list here, call out a name and unmute.
Yeah.
And if
you don't want to speak, you can just say pass. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So Sloan, go ahead.
Why don't we give people a chance? So just when I ask a question like that, people, because otherwise sometimes people are thinking about what they want to say while they're listening to other people. So let's just take a few, maybe 30 seconds.
I would just offer, I really appreciate Sloan's comment and concerns. For me, we're in an amazing period in human history. And there is some sort of awakening that's going on, both possibly within us, but also in the collective. But if we don't do our individual work, that collective awakening is not going to happen. So I see myself as going back and forth between the collective we spaces that I engage in and doing my own work. I have to do my own work, and then maybe I can help the blossoming of the we spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate your presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. So Sarah, if you want to go down and just whatever's alive for you, I guess that's the prompt. Whatever's alive for you in this moment that you feel like sharing, could be just a word or two or a sentence. Great. Thank you, Chris.
Why don't we start with who's on the phone? We have one person on the phone who's called in. I'm going to unmute you.
And if you don't want to speak, just say pass, so we'll know.
And if I don't hear anything, I'll just keep going. So, Amu?
I don't know if she heard her name.
Amu? Okay. Bajana G?
Hello there.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Hi there. We've been talking a lot about deep triggers. And what I'm really with is that they come from unresolved trauma. I think moving into awareness is really important and moving into the space. But we also need to address the trauma head on and do work with our personal material.
Absolutely. It's not an either or, Bajana, I don't think. Both and. Absolutely. Thank you for that
Thank you.
contribution. Yeah.
Cecilia? Clifford? Hi. This might be, we do have 25 people on the call, Barbara.
Okay. And I'm seeing the time, yeah. So let's just then give a chance, anyone who wants to speak, just raise your hand. We'll leave it back at that. And if there's no one, then we'll move to you, Sarah, and you can close with the announcements.
Okay. Sloan has something else to say. Anyone else? Okay.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but I'd like to say.
Sure.
I was very struck with the invitation to have small moments, and this may address some of what was discussed earlier, that sometimes if I'm sitting too long in the timelessness, I think I actually can go more into a blank state rather than a really alert state. So having the little tiny moments all through the day, actually as a reminder of what that's providing, moments of deep, peaceful quiet, but not so long, that to me feels like new information and very helpful.
Beautiful. Thank you, Judith.
You're welcome.
And Jim, looks like Jim has a hand up.
Jim,
yeah.
There you go.
Whoa. Hold on, we got some feedback here.
yeah, I'm going to mute you just for while you figure that out. It's pretty loud.
Yeah, Nancy's got her. Why don't you turn your...
Ouch. Okay, give me a thumbs up when she's turned hers off, Jim.
Your volume up?
It's still going. That's so much.
You want to move to Sloan and come back to Jim?
Okay.
We'll come right back to you, Jim.
Hi, Jim. I want to, what you've left me, one of the things you've left me with is the idea of the visibility cloak and the importance of this kind of group in understanding what's invisible and what's not visible, and the importance of connectedness. And very often I make a comment in a group like this and I wonder if I'm a part of the group or I'm coming from something way outside and absurd. And so one of the ways I want to explore is the visibility cloak and who's under it and who's not under it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sloan.
All right, Jim.
Oh, thank you. Sorry for all that technology that gives us what we have here, and also, you know, I would like to, and this is, you know, in respect to all of us, but also to Christopher, really want to put an emphasis on the tend and befriend sort of nexus of our manifestation and the divinity that we are, as being one of the biggest portals, I think, that is building out in this sort of awakening to what we space is. And so the gathering with and being in this shared field even today, and to be, for me, the sensing into the shared field is, how do I put this, is something that is heartfelt prior to the words emerging and forming concepts and structures. The liveliness, being with the liveliness and trusting the liveliness of our shared awakened awareness, just even saying those words is I just want to put that in there for all of us, myself included. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all. Sarah, why don't you take last time here, share announcements?
I would love to, although, is it just me that's, okay. I was hearing a bunch of echo as well. Well, thank you for that last comment, Jim. I love the shared aliveness of this that moves all of us. And maybe, Sloan, we are all coming from an infinite amount of ways into this one shared field. And I think that's what I love most about these conversations, is that there is this alive field holding all of our unique experiences. And so I really appreciate all of you here. It's a joy for me to get to have these kind of conversations and connect with all of you always. Yeah, it's also such a joy that as the center turns, as Barbara said, we've been around for about 7 or 8 years, and as we are shifting into new unfoldment of what we are as a community, I just want to say that we're beginning to, we used to be a membership community of teachers and therapists and coaches, specifically pointing to non-dual awareness, that kind of function or role we could play, like Barbara said, in helping to transmit this that we are to other people. And we're recognizing now that however, that happens in much more ways than just teaching and coaching. And therapists are also really excited to include any way that it's coming through you're noticing that the field is moving through you to serve others, through music, through whatever profession you're doing, through mapping consciousness, through being a parent, through just being a human being. We are really excited to expand the community to include all people and their journey of how consciousness is serving itself through us. So coming up next for the public crew of the Center for Non-Dual Awareness members is a hosted morning with Krishna Gauchi. Some of you know him. He's been a long-time member. And we're going to be doing a 7-week online retreat with him starting in January. So on November 18th, Sunday, we'll be doing a free hosted morning like this, satsang with him. And you can get to know what the 7-week online course will be like with him starting in January. And my last announcement to those of you still here is that this coming weekend, November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we are going to be meeting in person. We meet twice a year now in person by yearly retreats. We'll be meeting in Berkeley, California. And I am excited to live stream it via Zoom like this. So you can register for that if you're interested. Barbara will be speaking a little bit more about this stuff as it relates to interpersonal relationships a little bit more. Our theme is embodying non-dual awareness specifically in personal relationships, and in this 3D space, in this relational space that we are always in with each other. So if you can't make it in person and you're interested in getting a Zoom link and checking out the presentation, sorry about that, via Zoom, you can go to our website, nondualcenter.org, and you can sign up for live stream there. And I'm sorry we went about 5 minutes over time. It's always gets so juicy. Sometimes we're always working with what's the right amount of time to do this. And so traditionally, I unmute all of us, and we all get a chance to say goodbye and thank you and share our love. So hopefully we see you all again at another time of a beautiful day, a beautiful night. Barbara, thank you so much again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you all. Many blessings. Lots of love.
Thank you. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good morning. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
my pleasure.
Have
All
a
right,
good day.
everybody. Thank you.
Yep.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.